What's going on, guys? Welcome to episode 17 of the Proven Knowledge Podcast, the Creators Series. Today I welcomed a Chicago-based producer. He's worked with Kanye West, he's worked with Cyhi The Prynce, Big K.R.I.T, Jack Harlow, a lot of other huge artists, and his name is Mark Byrd. I've been following Mark's work probably for around 5 years now, when he produced on a Cyhi The Prynce mixtape, and then he went on to pretty much be executive producer on Cyhi's debut album, No Dope on Sundays. So I became a huge fan of his work. I reached out to him, and he was kind enough to get back to me about being on the show, so we were finally able to make it happen today. He told some really interesting stories. He told a story about how he had this one beat that he kind of held for a long time, and he ended up playing it for Rapsody. I think he said at one of her shows, and she ended up making it the intro on one of her last albums, and how that whole experience was just really crazy, how everything kind of fell into place. I won't go too much into detail. You'll hear it in the episode. He talked about when he was with a production group called The Freshmen, and how he's since kind of been doing his own thing. They're still in touch, him and the other group members, but he talked about how much he learned from that experience as far as sound selection, as far as, how to construct beats and things like that, and how he's applied it to just being out on his own more. And then we talked about kind of the possibility of there being a producers union, if that would ever be a thing. I know a lot of people have talked about that in the past, but we talked about how important it is for producers to know your rights and just know that you're worth a lot more than a lot of people are going to tell you you're worth, especially when it comes down to getting paid and getting what you need out of certain situations. And I'd say really the whole theme of the episode is just to kind of build your own situation out as best you can and not rely on a ton of other outside people or kind of chase what everyone else is doing. And I couldn't agree more with that message. So without further ado, let's get into this episode. Okay, welcome everyone to episode number 17 of the Proven Knowledge Podcast. Today we got a guest. He's a Chicago-based producer. He's worked with Big K.R.I.T, Cyhi The Prynce, Kanye West, and he goes by the name of Mark Byrd. How are you doing, man?
What's good?
I'm doing great, man. Like I said before, I really appreciate you getting back with me about being on the show. I've been looking forward to it for the past couple months since we talked on Instagram and everything. So I'm really happy to have you here. So to begin, I kind of just have every guest kind of just give a little bit of background about yourself, how long you've been doing music, kind of how you got into producing and all that stuff.
Wow, okay, it's a story. Yeah, man. Background is like I said, you touched on it. I'm from Chicago originally. Man, my uncle used to be a producer, like way back in the days. So like my first start run-ins with studios, I was probably like 8 or 9, and I would go to studios and I would learn how to just do certain things. I used to rap, and that's really where like producing really came into play, because I would go to studios and try to get beats from people, and I would hear the beats that they would do for other people, and then like when I go, I would hear what they be trying. I'm like, come on, man, I know what you did for the dude. So I was like, all right, I need to start making the stuff that I want to rap to, and that's when it like I kind of jumped into production, like, but I've always loved it, like, you know what I'm saying, always been around it.
Nice.
I say the thing that really made me want to get into producing was horror movies. The score and horror movies. I'm a horror movie fanatic, so I used to be watching these movies and like the string, the chords and everything. I was like, yo, I want to do that. And I was like, how can I take that and make it into a beat? And that's that.
I've actually heard a few people say that about horror movies, how they have like that certain like eeriness to the way like they put it in there to make you like, as an audience member, you're gonna like jump at certain parts and everything. So like if you take that and you combine it with like modern like sounds and like a DAW, it could be something crazy. So I see how like you kind of got influence from that and everything. That's pretty interesting story. How long have you been producing? Like what year was that when you started kind of doing that?
Man, actually, when I first started to like play with drum machines and keyboards, I was like 8 or 9. I'll say when I like actually started to produce music that would get recorded to. This was like the late 90s, high school. So like 16, 17, I was making beats, and the homies we would rap to the records and record them. So yeah, it's been a while. As far as like really getting solidified, I'll say 2009 was my first like major placement. So since then, I've been like on that scale of things. So it's been a cool little journey, man.
So it's been around 20 years probably in reality.
Oh yeah. This is definitely not new.
Yeah, I feel it, man. That's awesome though. So I know that this year has kind of been pretty interesting for everyone. You know, like no matter who you are, you've dealt with certain things this year, and I know you yourself, you've been pretty open in the past about dealing with anxiety, dealing with depression, dealing with things you've had to kind of overcome. How do you think you've been able to deal with everything that's been going on in the world over the past like 8 or 9 months? And have you learned any new skills, or is there anything that you kind of want to share that you feel comfortable with that you've taken away from this time?
Man, honestly, during this time, what's crazy is when the initial quarantine happened, the first thing I said to myself was like, oh, this is easy, because I live like this anyway. Like, quarantine doesn't bother me. I don't really go outside much anyway. What I will say is, I would see on social media all the time, like, yo, people like, yo, you need to find a new skill. Yo, you gotta hustle. You gotta do this. What's crazy is, during the whole entire quarantine, I did not work. I didn't create. I feel like, you know, people forget that we're creatives and we're humans too. Mm-hmm. So we feel things the same way that other people feel things. And with most creatives, we get our energy from the world. So if the world is at a standstill, where are we drawing inspiration from? It's hard to create for nothing. So I said it before to some homies one time, and I was like, man, when I actually started to create again was during the civil unrest with police brutality and all of the protests. That's when I started to create again, because I've always felt like that my music had meaning. So at that point, I was like, oh, now I have something to create too. And I believe it's a post on my Instagram, and it was like my first time being in a creative seat in like 3 months or so. And the caption was, the revolution needs a soundtrack. So it was like, now I feel compelled to create. As far as like what I learned during the quarantine is, I learned a lot about myself and my spirituality. I read a lot. I prayed a lot. I started writing a book. Really just diving into self and pulling back the layers and figuring out all the stuff as a human. It's like, man, there's so much stuff that we have that we haven't peeled back those layers on to actually try to heal from. So that stuff is what was most important for me. It's like actual growth as a person.
Yeah. I think too, like a lot of people forget about that. Like you just said, is like as creators, we are still people. You know what I mean? Like I think a lot of outside like fans and things, they look at their favorite artists and they just see them as like, I like their music, this, that, and the third, but they don't realize, you know, they got like a personal life. They got a lot of things going on that you'll never see in the public eye. So there's a lot of things that could be going on behind the scenes that you don't really know about. But like as far as that time of just everyone was in the house, like I feel like the most important thing to do was just kind of sit and like self-reflect on a lot of things that you might not have known before about yourself, and you learn so much. And like as far as like being able to create music, I feel like if you learn more about yourself, then you'll be able to put that into your music as well. And like you said, you felt it was more important to talk about like the social injustice and a lot of those important things that are affecting a lot of different people, and a lot of different people are going to be able to take what you made in your music and run with that and apply it to, you know, what they believe in and all their things that they're trying to do. So I think it's all like about the big picture at the end of the day. So, but the quarantine was just such a crazy time, and I really hope we're kind of moving past it. I don't know what's going to be happening in the next few months, but
I don't see life ever going back to what we once knew as normal.
Yeah.
I honestly feel like they might shut it down again. I feel like that's a deeper conversation, but yeah, I feel like that's coming.
Yeah,
we're probably gonna see it maybe like later this month or going towards the winter.
Yeah, that's what I've been hearing. Is just like as the weather gets cold again, and like you're gonna be in the house anyway, especially up where we are. We're up north. We get snow and all kinds of stuff. So
yeah,
I don't know what's gonna happen, but we'll see. We'll see as we go along. So kind of getting back to the music thing here. What DAW have you been using for the past few years, or maybe have you used the same one since you began, or have you kind of bounced around?
Are you talking about as far as like my equipment and my workflow and everything?
Yep.
Man, it's been Machine for the last 8-9 years. So honestly, I just stick with what I love.
You're an MPC guy then.
Huh?
You're the MPC guy then, right?
Nah, I'm all Machine.
Oh, okay.
Native Instruments Machine. That's all I've been using for like the last 8-9 years. Of course, I went through all of my cycles. I have access to pretty much everything. But yeah, it's pretty much Machine. I have added quite a few analog synths to the workflow, and for the most part, that's the whole thing. And Pro Tools just for the final sequence, but mostly everything is crafted in Machine.
That's interesting. I haven't heard anyone that has said that yet, that they do it all out of Machine. So I've heard like mostly people are in like FL or Reason now, and like they're all doing stuff that way. But it's interesting to hear you kind of come up with it like through that. So
yeah, I even have a couple records that are out that were just 2 tracks from the Machine.
That's insane.
Never even touched the DAW, just the 2-track. Everybody like, yo, the mix is crazy. What's wrong?
I think I've only heard that from like Kanye when he used to do the old records, and he used to like bounce out like 1 or 2 tracks, and that was the whole thing.
Yeah, that's it. Sometimes that's all it calls for. It's crazy because sometimes you'll try to stem it out and mix it, and it just doesn't have the same cohesive feeling as 2 tracks. So you just roll what sounds better.
I actually heard. Do you know who Bink is? The producer.
Yeah.
He's got.
Bink is one of my favorites. That's like my big brother.
He's got a podcast, and he had S1 on the podcast last week, and they were talking about mixes. And he said he started when he would send them out, he would put all the drums in one thing so that they wouldn't mess up the sound of the record. Because he said he would work so hard to get the drums sounding a certain way, he didn't want the engineer to mess it up, so he would bounce it like that and just send them, and that's what he started doing just to get it to sound how he wanted it to sound. So
yeah, that's definitely I'm very picky about my drums. Like, hey man, look, turn that up. Y'all mess that up.
They gotta knock. If they don't knock, there's no point. So I know you were part of the Freshmen when you kind of started producing. What do you think it's been like from going from that to just being kind of doing your own thing? Is there any differences between working in a team and working kind of primarily by yourself, or?
Yeah, like working with a team, man, you always have somebody to bounce the ideas off of. So it's always like, yo, I'm not sure about this, and somebody could come in and be like, well, that's it. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. But change this. All right, cool. So starting to work by myself, I had to take everything that I learned from the team aspect and bring it over to working alone. So everything, like when I'm working on records, I would remember what the homies would tell me as far as like when it was it. So it's like, now I have something to measure it by, or the homies will point out, okay, you need to do better with your sound selection. So it's like now I'm very particular about sound selection. So it's a little different, but I do have a partner now. You know what I'm saying? So with my brand now, it's called God Level, and my partner is Charity Work. So me and her we bounce off ideas. And even though me and the Freshmen are no longer a team, we still homies, and we talk like all the time. So even with that, like I'll send records and be like, yo, and the homies might be like, yo, change this, and vice versa. So you know what I'm saying? I still got that camaraderie and that team aspect with a lot of homies, but it's definitely a different thing because sometimes being by yourself, you don't know when it's it. You'll drive yourself crazy trying to be like, because you're trying to compare yourself to what you've already done.
And I think that's good too. You kind of took that experience with kind of working with them, and now you're able to know kind of better how to, like you said, have the right sounds in your beats and do all that kind of thing. I remember, I think you guys produced for Cyhi on like the second Black History project That was like the first time I saw The Freshman. I heard the tag, and I didn't know like who that even was. And then later, when you did the No Dope on Sundays, and your name was all over it, I didn't even connect the dots that you were a part of that until like way later. But I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. How like he was working with him then, and like so that's pretty awesome. So that's kind of how I like discovered your work, was through that and through you being with The Freshman. So that's awesome. So what producers or musicians do you say would be like your biggest influences, or someone that you've kind of grown up listening to that helped inspire what you do as far as when you make music?
That's a lot. I'll say Quincy Jones, of course. Marvin Gaye is my favorite artist. Dr. Dre, obviously. I'm a huge, and this is crazy, I don't get to say, I try to say it as much as possible so people can really understand. When I'm producing records and I have to like produce the vocal, like, okay, say this and say it like this, don't rap here. I get a lot of my vocal production from Phil Collins.
That's interesting.
The way that Phil Collins, he uses space as an instrument. So I get my vocal production style from Phil Collins. We got Teddy Riley, Organized Noise, Bink, Kanye, Just Blaze, Pharrell. There's so many people. Mike Dean, Jesus, Paddle Cat. It's like so many people because I absorb everything and I really just break down and I analyze stuff and I pay attention. And I be like, yo, that's like, and I'm still a fan before I'm a producer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think that's important because like you always learn from like not only the people you look up to, but your peers as well. You know what I mean? Like I think like the people you listen to every day are gonna somehow influence you, even if you don't know it. So
yeah, sometimes it happens.
Yeah, so I think like and I hear that in your sound, to be honest, just from listening to your music. Like I hear like you use a lot of attention to detail with what you're doing, and it's very like rich, like luscious sounds, in my opinion, of like what I've heard from your work. So I can definitely hear like how the influences came through in a good way for you. So that's awesome. Would you say you're more comfortable with collaborating with producers, or would you prefer to just do everything yourself, or does it not really matter? Does it kind of just depend on who you're working with, or how does that go?
It don't matter to me. We had a rule. Like I said, I take a lot of the stuff that we did as the freshman, and I bring it into just like everything that I do. We had a rule working together. The rule was whatever is best for the song. There's no ego. The only thing that is important in the room is the song. So when it comes to, if it calls for me to collaborate and bring in this person and that person to get the song where it needs to be, then that's what we're doing. If I can handle the task by myself, cool, then that's what we're doing. Even if I'm collaborating with somebody and my parts don't necessarily make the song better, take my parts off. I don't care. Whatever is going to make the song the best. It's all about the song at the end of the day.
I feel like a lot of people like forget about that when they're kind of in a room with a lot of different people too. Like you want to be involved as much as you can, and you want this, that, and the third. But I like you said, it's about the music. You know what I mean? Like as weird as this is to say, I think like the people that are listening to the product, they don't really care about how it was made. You know what I mean? They care about it was good at the end of the day. Most people don't even know producers, engineers. They don't even know all that stuff even exists. If you're just like an average everyday person, you might not know that any of that is even a thing. So it's kind of weird to get wrapped up in like, oh, I got to do this, and this part that I just did has to be in here. I've always found that very strange to me, because I'm just like, especially if you all get credit for the song, you know what I mean, too? Because like there's no point in getting all worked up about, well, my part didn't get used here and I really was attached to it. It's like, I don't think you should have that type of attachment if you're involved in the process, you know what I mean? You got to do it for what's very important is the music good? That's basically it. So that's how I viewed it, and I'm kind of glad that you brought that up, because I think that, I don't know, I feel like a lot of people too, if they're just like starting out or they're in a room with like bigger artists and bigger producers, they might not understand that. You know what I mean? Like they just want to be as involved as possible in the process.
Yeah.
So.
But then too, it's probably the stigma that comes along with, oh, you use a sample, oh, you use a loop, oh, it's 4 of y'all on that beat. It's always something to it, but it's just like, man, look, it's all about the music, and then too, it's just like, if I make a record, but I can share it with 3 or 4 of my homies, why wouldn't I want us all to be a part of this? Like, people, we do it to ourselves. Mm-hmm. I think it's human emotion. Mm-hmm. I need this, I need that. That's all it is.
People overthink stuff way too much, I feel like. So, yeah. But, live and learn, I guess. So who has been, I know this is kind of hard to narrow it down, who has been your favorite artist to work with, or what has been your favorite record to be a part of so far as what you produced?
Man, that is kind of hard to narrow it down. Well, we as God level, me and Charity, we have our own artist. His name is Dante Higgins. He's, obviously my favorite artist to work with. If he's the only artist out of all of my years that I've actually stood by, as far as saying this is my artist, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. The reason I say he's my favorite because the songs come organic. You know what I'm saying? It's nothing forced. It's just all feeling. Cyhi is another joy to work with. Just from the start to the finish of the record, you will never guess what we were thinking initially, and then it led to the end of the song. You'd be like, "That's where that came from." It's like, yeah. And so that's always dope. I think even with all of that said, my favorite record, one of them is the Rapsody Nina record. Just because as a producer, when you're creating something, 9 times out of 10, you have a complete vision of where you see this record. That to not have sat in the room with her and created that record, to make it with a vision, and then an artist takes it and nails the vision without you even having to push the vision, that was like, oh wow, how many times does that really happen? That's like one of my favorites, because it came out exactly how I've seen it happening. And randomly, it's one of the only records I'll probably have so much footage of, like from the inception of the record. I actually have the footage of when I caught the idea. I was talking about it because it was like I was watching Birth of a Nation and the Strange Fruit record played at the end. So I actually spoke about that record on social media, so I saved the video. I randomly found it. There was one time I brought in a bass player. I have that. One time I brought in a guitar player to try to get to something else. I have that footage. The very day that I made the record, I remember me and the homies from the freshmen, we went to a school to speak to some kids. And as we were setting up, I'm like, yo, I got this joint I made. And I play it for the first time for anybody. I have that footage. I have like almost everything documented from when I made that record.
That's insane.
And that's like one of the only records I have any of that type of stuff.
It's almost like you spoke it into existence, almost like what it would become.
Yeah, it's like you initially knew what it was gonna be.
That's insane.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
wow.
I've never really heard that, because like I know I've heard a lot of producers say that like you shouldn't get too attached to like a certain song, like you should just keep creating because you really don't know what's gonna happen. But that's like a very rare instance that would happen, and that would become like that type of a record. Was that on her last album then?
Yeah, and to top it off, I'm like, yo, I want the intro song, because the intro is the first record everybody hears, and it's the one that sets the tone for the album. So to nail my vision and get the intro at the same time, I was like, oh, this is great.
It's like a win-win.
Yeah, it was perfect.
Yeah, you didn't even know what happened.
Really perfect.
Man, that's insane, dude. That's a great story. So you said you weren't even in the studio for that then, right? You kind of just sent that out?
No. So how that happened is I made the record, and what was crazy is I never played it for any artist. I made it and I never played it for an artist. Me and Cyhi was also his tour DJ. We were on tour with Big K.R.I.T, and our tour manager, shout out my brother K.R.I.T, he's cool with Knight and their whole camp. So while we're at the stop, I was doing laundry. He calls and was like, "Yo, I'm about to go tonight. You need to come back to the bus." I'm like, "All right, back." So I come back. I get there. We go see Knife Wonder and Crisis and the whole Jam Squad. We just vibing and we having a good time. Rapsody pops in. We speak. It was just a good vibe. And somebody, I don't even remember who it was, like, "Yo, you should play records for rap." And everyone's like, "Yeah, go play." So we went in the back room and I'm just going through records, and in my mind I'm like, "Oh, she's perfect." So it was like the first time I ever played that record for an artist. Now mind you, me and Cyhi were very close, and I never played him the record. So I played it for her. Knife Wonder peeks his head in the room and was like, "Yo, what's that?" And I'm like, so she's picking records. He comes back in the room and was like, "Yo, play that one again." I play it again. He was just shaking his head and he left. Then I think he came back and asked me to play it one more time, and I was just like, okay, this might be special. And so after that, like maybe like a little bit after that, she hit me and was like, "Yo, do not play this for anybody else. We're definitely keeping this for the album." So I was like, "All right, cool." And then like a little bit after that, she sent me a video clip of like her, like the Pro Tools of her doing the first verse. I was like, "Yo, this is where I'm going with it." And I'm like, "Oh shit, that was it. That's perfect." So and yeah, that's how it happened.
Man, that's like a whole movie for like one song. Like that doesn't even sound real.
Pretty crazy.
And that says something too. That like Ninth Wonder kept popping in and was like, "Hey, what's that?" Like, fuck.
Yeah, that wigged me out. I was like, okay, wow. Like,
that is crazy, dude. Yeah, I've never heard like that story before or anything. And like Rapsody, I know she's very talented and everything. I didn't even know you produced for her, so this is all new to me too. So man, that's insane. So thank you for sharing.
Yo, that's the other crazy part. I was the only producer that's not part of the Soul Council that was on that album. I was the only outside producer.
It was meant to be. That's all we got to check out to. It was
that's crazy.
Everything aligned. Everything aligned for that to happen somehow.
Yeah, that was perfect.
That's insane. So what do you think? We're gonna kind of shift to the business side of things real quick. What do you think is something that you didn't know about the music business or the music industry, whatever you want to call it, before you began your career that you wish you would have known? Something that kind of like fell through the cracks, maybe.
It wasn't too much of the business that I didn't know that fell through the cracks that I wish I would have known, because I feel like I learned everything in a timely manner of when I should have known it. I feel like my only thing is I feel like I should have produced an artist way earlier than I'm doing now. That would be it, to actually build your own house early. That would be the one thing I wish I had did early, or I wish I'd have known the real importance of doing that like early in my career. That would be the thing.
I've heard that from so many like bigger producers. Is just you should always start with someone you know, or someone kind of that's starting from where you're starting from. So just build it up, you know what I mean? Because
well, we actually were like, as the freshmen, what was crazy is we were rappers, we were artists too. So that's how we actually formed a production team, because we were producing for ourselves. But once we started to see how hard it was to break ourselves, and I think it was probably just a difficulty of wearing both hats, having to be the producers, having to also be the businessman of it, and then having to be the artist. It just became a little overwhelming. So I think that's why we abandoned the whole artist idea. So we started the right way. We just didn't see it all the way through. And we searched for artists, but it's just like, man, finding somebody that that has everything that you're looking for is not that easy. You find people that have the talent but don't have the drive. You have people that have the drive but don't have the talent. Then you find people that have both but don't have the vision. Then you find people with the vision that have neither. It's just like, So it's just like, it's not as easy as people think. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, that's the one thing as far as like the business goes, because at that point, when you build your own house, you don't have to rely on chasing placements. And the chasing placements game can be exhausting, as well as the stuff that you have to deal with chasing placements is tiring, like sample clearances, payment issues, so much other stuff. So, you know, building your own house is very important. So I wish I had done that earlier.
I think also just you saying how long you've kind of been doing music and everything, I feel like you had to kind of go through some stuff too first. Like you said, you didn't really understand that, like, you had to kind of build out your own thing instead of kind of trying to do all this other stuff. I think like that probably helped you out a lot too, just having come from that, and then now you're able to take what you learned from that and apply it to what you're doing with your artists now, and it works a lot better. So I think, like, I don't know, myself, I felt like when I first started, I haven't even been doing it that long, only 4 years, but when I first started, I felt like I had to do a ton of stuff that really wasn't necessary, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't know that I could kind of start building my own thing. I thought I had to go chase what everyone else was doing, or like what the big people are doing, but that's really not the case, especially like nowadays when it's a lot easier, I feel, to do it. I know, like what you said is like, finding the right artist as a producer probably isn't always easy. You know, you might not always have like your friends that are doing it on the level that you want to be doing it, but I don't know, I feel like if you have a distinct like vision for what you're trying to do, you just have to find the right people, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Kind of build around what you're trying to do. So, but that's great to hear that you have a like good situation going on.
Yeah.
What do you think has been, as far as publishing goes and that aspect of music, how important has that been to your career? And kind of just talk about that, because I've had every producer kind of give like their own explanation of what that is, since a lot of people really don't get that whole side of the coin there.
Yeah, a lot of people miss the publishing situation. It's like the first thing I always tell people: whatever the case is, I don't care what the case is, do not give away your publishing. Like, that is your entitlement to everything that song or record does for the rest of your life and years after. You feel what I'm saying? Like, publishing is super important. A lot of producers eat off of pretty much all of us eat off publishing. Like, the percentages that we own of these records and what these records do and what we bring in. You know what I'm saying? So publishing is like one of the most important things that anybody can know. Like, it's complete ownership. So like, if you make a record today and in 20 years it becomes one of the most popular sampled records and you own your publishing, everybody that samples you have to pay you. Like, but if you don't own it,
you're screwed.
It's a wrap. Yeah. Man, prime example, man, crazy story. It's, you know, I've heard this story. It might be an urban legend. I don't know how many people know of this story. But the guy that initially wrote R. Kelly's I Believe I Can Fly, he sold all the rights to that record for $100,000. Yeah, $100,000 seems great in the grand scheme of things when you have nothing. Yep. But then when you see what this record, I Believe I Can Fly, has done,
way more than that.
$100,000, you probably could have had $10 million had you retained your publishing. Yep. Like, that song will, you know, I mean, I'm not sure how it's going to do with all of his personal issues, but that song was the graduation song every year. Like, that song is heavily played. Like, you know what I mean? Had that guy never sold that publishing, he'd probably be a multi-millionaire off of just that one record versus he made $100,000, and once he paid out his taxes and did whatever he did, man, he probably didn't even keep that money for 6, 7, 8 months. So
it's all different too.
Never give away your publishing.
Yeah. And I've heard crazy things like that too. It's like they'll give you an advance of like a lot of like a 10 grand or whatever, or maybe even more, like you just said. And if you don't, like you said, if you don't have a lot right now, you're like, whoa, I need that money now because that's gonna change a lot of things. But you're not looking at the big picture of how you could like years and years and years you could still be getting paid by this one song or these few songs if you had the publishing. You know what I mean? Like, I think you have to have the general understanding of what it actually is and like how it works to then like look at both things and be like, well, I'd rather do that than have this advance that's probably going to be gone pretty quick.
And then too, going off of that, man, most people don't realize what the business is. The advance is actually the money that they're paying you for your time and your effort for what you worked on. Mm-hmm. They owe you the advance as well as publishing. Mm-hmm. Like, there's no one or the other. No, I get both. I spent hours out of my time working on this record. That's what the advance is for. The publishing, I'm entitled to the rights because I produced this record. Mm. No, you get both, and that's the era that we're in, where a lot of these guys will try to make it on some old, well, you get one or the other. Like, nah, bro, you run me both, man. Give me my advance and my pub. And like for me, like, you know what I'm saying, most people might not have what I charge for the advance. Cool, but you're gonna give me more publishing. My 50%, cool. If you can't give me my full advance, you might have to give me 60, 65 of that. You know what I'm saying? Because you can't pay what I require. So it's just like, no, man, like never give away your publishing and never think that you're not owed in advance because these folks are giving you publishing. Man, that's the banana in the tailpipe trick that they've been running for a long time lately. You know what I'm saying? I just had that situation. Somebody tried to, say that, you know what I'm saying, they didn't have a budget for an advance. It's like, nah, y'all got that, and I'm gonna need them both. It's not gonna happen. You're not about to get my public like crazy. Hell no.
So I'm gonna kind of go. This is not in the questions. I kind of just want to see your opinion on this because this is pretty interesting. What do you think about like? I know like Sunny Digital and a lot of other producers have talked about like doing a union for producers or something like that to kind of like push the importance of like producer rights and like what you just said. There's a lot of ways for these labels and these people to get around kind of giving you what you actually deserve to get. So what do you think about that? Do you think that would help things? Do you think we need set rules in place since there's not really a lot of like concrete rules? Like, what are your opinions on that?
Honestly, man, what's crazy is me, not sure you know who Focus is. Focus 3 Dot. He's one of Dr. Dre's producers.
I think I've heard of him. Yeah.
Focus, the Olympics, from Detroit, Cardo. We actually sat down in 2014 and talked about a union 6 years ago because of the unfair treatment that producers were getting. So I believe that a union would be dope. You know what I'm saying? Because it's a lot of young guys coming up that's just doing what they feel like they have to do to get in these rooms, and they're not getting their just due. And it affects all of us long term because they're like, well, we're not going to give y'all XYZ because we could just go give little such and such this and they'll be fine with it. So I feel like we all need to stand up. It's just like what's going on in the world. We need a unified front to combat what's going on as far as like improper business practices. So I feel like the union would be great because we can also, at that point, we can also stand up for the guys that don't have money to get proper representation and things of that nature. It's like, nah, well, let me go ahead and give you the game. Don't do that because this is why you shouldn't do that. And then with the union, you can contact each other. Like, yo, I'm working on such and such project. Anybody work on this album? They telling me they don't have a budget. Oh, no, they got a budget because such and such paid me to do the, okay, cool, boom. Like, that's stuff like that is what a union can do. We can have each other's back through and through. So, yeah, I think it's dope.
I think, too, like, a lot of producers on a lot of different, like, if we want to call it levels, they kind of all go through the same thing, you know what I mean? Like, there's people that have placements with, like, huge artists that have gone through this exact same thing that people are going through placing with other, like, indie artists, you know what I mean? Like, we've all dealt with bad contracts or bad situations, and like, so I think it's important to know that, like you said, we should have each other's backs as far as that goes, because we've all dealt with it at one time or another, but, like, there's just so many moving parts to the industry, especially now with like streaming and all this stuff going on, and I'm just trying to figure out how like you could tackle all those problems. I think it would just take a long time, but I I think we just have to keep the conversation going. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but I definitely appreciate you giving that input because I figured you would have some experiences with it and everything. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm definitely down to sit in on a union. Like, call me in for that. I'm with it.
So I only got a few more questions for you, Mark. What projects do you have coming up? What artists are you working with? Can we expect to hear some music from you or production that you're working on for people's albums in the near future?
Man, I hate to say it just because this industry is so weird. You don't really know until you know.
Yeah.
But I've been in with quite a few people. So if all of that pans out, then I think y'all will be in for some real treats. Like the records that have been crafted are like some crazy fun stuff. But what I can say that's a definite is my crew, God Level, which is me, Charity Work, and our artist Dante. We are definitely about to do like an insane lock-in and just work. So we're going to be releasing a lot of music on our own, as far as like putting our own artists out and doing that. That's really, to be totally honest, that's the most exciting thing that I have going right now. Don't get me wrong, placements are cool, working with this artist is great, working with, but building your own, man, nothing is as rewarding as that. So that's really what I'm super excited about. Everything else is cool. It'll happen when it happens. I have good relationships with a lot of great artists. Cool, you know what I'm saying? But this, building this brand, oh man, I'm geeked out of my mind. That's all I'm really like. Wait till y'all hear that.
That's awesome to know though that you have your own thing. I can tell you're very excited about it, so I'm happy for you, man. That sounds freaking amazing, and I'm looking forward to hearing all that stuff. So
Yeah.
If you could go back 10 years, Mark, and kind of tell yourself anything, maybe give yourself advice, or maybe not do anything, what would you do?
10 years? Oh, dang, that was like right around the time when I first started. Man, I would tell myself to keep doing what I was doing then. Sometimes in this industry and in this game, man, we get caught up in the supply and demand. And in getting caught up in that supply and demand, you start to do things that aren't necessarily your wheelhouse per se. You know what I'm saying? It's not really what you do through and through, but you have to do it because it's like, I gotta get these checks, I gotta eat, and that's the thing. But like, when I look back on it, it's just like every time that I just didn't follow or didn't try to compete with the supply and demand and just did what I do, is when it always worked out for me. So I would tell myself my 10-year ago self to just keep doing what you're doing, you know, man. Like, I would probably have saved 3 to 4 years of my career by doing that, because I lost a lot of time trying to compete with the flow of things versus just being who I was. So yeah, that's what I would tell myself 10 years ago. Yeah.
So 10 years from now, where do you think you want to be in your career or in life in general?
Man, somewhere chilling, scoring movies. Really that simple. I mean, I do want to, you know what I'm saying, do a few more things musically and conquer some more music stuff, but also like, man, I see it being bigger than that. It's just like, I do want to score film. I want to get into like just more executive producing roles. Like, let me help flesh the idea out, but definitely like film, like not just TV, film. Like, give me the Hans Zimmer treatment in 10 years. Let me get that off.
You got to do some of those horror movies.
Man, I tried to reach out to Monkey Paw Productions because I really wanted to be a part of the Candyman. And, you know, being from Chicago, and actually the projects where they filmed the original Candyman is where I'm from.
Oh, that's crazy.
So if I could have been able to get into that, that would have just full circle. Yeah. But definitely like a horror movie. Halloween is like my favorite horror series. So anything of that, like if I can get in there, then count me in.
Nice. Any final words of wisdom today?
Man, yeah, be yourself. Build your own house. They can't kick you out your crib. Nah, seriously, that's really it, man. Stick to what you do. You know what I'm saying? There's a lane for everybody, and there's somebody that wants to hear everything that you're doing. Man, a wise gentleman told me one time, there's a million people in the world that want to meet you, they just don't know it yet. Don't change who you are, be who you are. And if you have the luxury to build your own house, man, do that. Like, these placements are gonna always be here. Artists are gonna always need music. But one thing is for sure is, once you build your house, you get to show people everything that you can do, start to finish. It's like, man, looking back at that spot, like, yo, I did that myself, versus being the person that only added a window pane.
Totally different.
Yeah, it's a way different thing. So it's just like, man, when you build your own house, man, that's like, look at all the greats. Look at all of the greats. Why do you think everybody went to the greats? They went to Timbaland because they seen what he did with Missy, Genuine, and Player. They went to Pharrell because they seen what Pharrell did with Clips and Khalees. They went to Kanye because they seen what Kanye did for himself. You know what I'm saying? They went to Dr. Dre because of NWA, Snoop, Eminem, countless others. They went to Quincy because, you know, Quincy was great, but then once Quincy did what he did with Michael, Teddy Riley, they went to Teddy because of what Teddy did with Guy. All of the greats, man. Organized Noise, they went to them because of Outkast and Goody Mob and the whole Dungeon family. Like, all of the greats did it. Man, if you really want to be legendary, build your house.
Well, Mark, that's all I have for you today. I appreciate all the great stories, man. The Rapsody story was amazing. I wish you luck on your artist development, on everything you got going. I'm looking forward to hearing your production soon again on a lot of different projects. So hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, man, just let me know. I'm always down.
Yes, bro. Thanks, guys, for listening today. That was episode 17. We'll be back this time next week. Like I said in the last episode, we now have a support button on every episode, I think on all the platforms. If you want to donate any type of money, anything like that, it's all going to go to, you know, continuing the show and continuing the message. So if you support, feel free to hit that button. And we will see you, like I said, this time next week. Thanks.